Keyword to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports. As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner, YouGov, offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more. From the keyword to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, Jimmy the Judge Barada, Jeff the Juice Cohen, Lindsay the Boss Boss. For those of you who are new to the weekly news show, what we do here is we cover all the gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in the industry. But the best part about the live stream is we get to do it live with you guys. You get to ask questions, get in our faces, challenge us. We welcome it. I know so many of you watch and lurk. That's okay. Still love having you. But we encourage you guys to get involved. It makes the show that much more fun. And it's the reason why we do this, is to talk with you guys every week. So highly encouraged. Welcome, everyone. Juan, he says, yes, I'm back. Happy holidays, everyone. Juan, great to have you back. Welcome. And guys, just a quick reminder, if it's your first time here, welcome. If it's not, if you love this live show, just make sure to tell your friends about it. Make sure, bring your colleagues, bring your coworkers, your family. There's no better content to be watching before the holidays here, so and around the holidays. So we encourage everyone to spread the live stream. Lindsay, how you doing this week?
Oh, lost my headphones, forgot my lighting. I feel like Jeff. Paul's on here like tan and glowing, and I'm just sitting in the dark hovel, sounding terrible.
Well, I don't know if you're making fun of my tan, or you just is it a compliment?
I'm jealous of the tan, Paul. What do you mean?
I mean, I'm
Paul,
looking like
great.
a real Floridian, right? If I was pale as can be, something would be wrong.
You know, I always wonder what's going on when I'm looking for you, Paul, for this or for that, and I need answers. And then I see you on Wednesdays, and you're just really tan and relaxed. Like, oh, well, there it is, and you deserve it, so it's okay.
For the record, 98% of my time outdoors has been with my laptop, so this hasn't exactly been vacation. But Jeff, Jimmy, how are you guys doing this week?
I'm doing good. I'm in the same boat. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
This is the best you've ever sounded, okay. Jeff. Finally a real microphone.
I'm working on different equipment here. I'm at my in-laws' house in New Jersey, so different setup. Although long-time viewers will recognize the setup. You know, I like to go. I'm here once in a while, so for our loyal viewers, you know.
You got to move the camera towards the basketball game.
Yeah, we'll see what the score is. We'll see what the score is later.
The hat is new, so you know it's the holidays. We've got the holiday hat on.
Yep.
Juan, he says, I think I completed something because I just made Lindsay laugh. That is, it's achievement complete. You get the badge.
I'm so glad you're back, Juan. I have missed you.
Guys, we have a lot to talk about, so I want to jump into it. Before I do, though, because Jimmy and I talked, I always like to tease the podcast, and I will say we had a great guest on the podcast this week. We had Johnny Ward, who's the co-founder and CEO of Damage Agency. They're an esports agency, creative agency focused on gaming, esports, and streamers. and really great conversation around brands, some of the brands they've worked with, like Intel and Subaru and Ubisoft, and all the work they've done there and insights there. Sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
I was going to add TikTok. I mean, just the list goes on
TikTok.
and on. It was incredibly impressive, but sorry, keep going.
And just what one of the things before we got into that interview, Jimmy and I were chit-chatting a little bit about Netflix, recent sort of focus on gaming content. And I thought it was interesting because we were talking about The Witcher, and both of us had sort of watched at least a few episodes of the new season. I'm curious, anyone in chat, and Lindsay and Jeff, have you guys watched the new season of The Witcher?
I have not yet.
I haven't yet either. I read all the books though, so I'm super excited.
Nerd. No, I'm
You're one of those people. Well, actually, the books are better than the movies.
Yeah. That was the next sentence.
I'm excited to see kind of how it lines up.
Yeah, because I was curious to get your thoughts on it, because I think Jimmy and I agreed. I won't spoil too much of the podcast, but Jimmy and I agreed that it's just so well done. It is fantastic, and how funny it is that the two basically top performing pieces of content on Netflix are based on video games, right? Like between Arcane and The Witcher. And I think I mentioned this on the podcast, that Arcane is now like all time highest on Netflix, which is crazy. That gaming, as I predicted, by the way, literally 3-4 years ago now, gaming would eventually topple all of traditional entertainment, or consume all of traditional entertainment, and we're seeing it. It's no surprise. Wani says, can I use the comment section for job hunting? I'm looking for a new job. Wani, you can use the comment section for anything you'd like. So yes.
Within reason.
Within reason.
That's a slippery slope.
I mean, if it's horrible, it will get removed probably by YouTube, but as long as it's on topic for the most part. All right, guys, let's jump into some news. Let's start with TikTok. Okay, TikTok in the news, and I thought this was interesting. Let me share my screen here so you guys can see. And the headline here is TikTok tests new desktop live streaming app focused on gaming streamers. So supposedly they're testing this new desktop streaming app. It'll allow people to broadcast directly from their PCs to TikTok Live, and with chat, with all sort of the kinds of features you would expect from a streaming platform. But it's going to be very much focused on gaming, obviously, and go to TikTok's sort of massive audience. Now, they're only testing it with a few thousand users right now, according to TikTok, so it hasn't been rolled out to everyone. But I'm curious what you guys think of TikTok's entry into the game/live streaming market, if they in fact roll this out, in a bigger way. But and how they may compete in a world where, Microsoft failed with Mixer, and there's sort of a long list of other sort of smaller failures. Jimmy, maybe start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I love what TikTok's doing. They really disrupted the social media industry in such a massive way, and they have so much steam, so much energy, movement behind them. It's wonderful to see them looking at gaming, from a fundamental perspective. The fact that TikTok is looking at implementing gaming tools or solutions to, apply against their audience is an interesting perspective. What I don't quite understand is that it's desktop related, whereas TikTok is a heavily mobile platform. Even the desktop, the web client is kind of not really up to par. So when I read this, I think, to me, this seems more like something that's determined or created to gather data about their users and less so about launching a product. So small rollout, testing the overlap with the gaming audience, but bringing it to PC, and this is an area that there's a lot of competitors in, that they're not gonna they're not going to win out, I don't think, in the long run. So I'm curious to see how they apply this software and how they apply this data to a mobile platform, because to me that's their strength and that's their win. But fundamentally, I love that they're looking at gaming. I don't quite see what their anticipated outcome is with this product.
Yeah, I mean, it looks and feels to me, guys, like they're just, they're creating a Twitch client or a Streamlabs OBS kind of client that you can stream to TikTok from your PC, your gaming. What was confusing to me is, and Jimmy, you touched on this, is it's not mobile, whereas mobile is their primary sort of platform right now. It's long form, right? Like people will stream for a few hours, I would assume, typical of game streaming. And TikTok is basically the platform of 1 minute videos, right? Like, or less.
Yeah.
This seems so far from their core competency. Like, do you guys, Jeff or Lindsay, do you guys have a theory on why they would want to even try this?
Well, those were going to be the things that I pointed out. I mean, I guess there's probably two reasons why they would try it. One, gaming, obviously a huge market. Pretty much anyone who's in social media content wants to have some sort of gaming strategy. Look at all the Chinese platforms, all the platforms here in the US. So it is clearly, the juice is worth the squeeze, if you will. It's a market that people want to be in. And more so even than gaming, I'm wondering if maybe, I appreciate the laughs for that. I'm wondering if maybe now I've broken
no dry lemons on today's show.
Now I've broken my own concentration. I'm wondering if maybe this is a little bit of a Trojan horse to get into live just in general. Because correct me if I'm wrong, does TikTok have sort of a live platform at all? Like, even they do?
Yeah. Ever.
Yeah,
is it a big component of it?
It's big enough. I mean, no. You can continue, Jeff, because I have a...
No, that was my thought, and shows my ignorance a little bit of TikTok, to be honest, where my thought is maybe this is them Trojan horsing their way into live, and as Jimmy said, getting data around kind of how people interact with a live kind of social media platform.
But to Jimmy's point, why not Trojan horse with mobile, where you're already quite entrenched?
From my
Lindsay,
understanding, though, they were wanting to set up a more in-depth studio and to eventually offer creator tools the same way Twitch does, and chat mods and all that stuff. This, from what I was reading, was a really rudimentary way of entering, kind of to gauge the interest at first. And a lot of the creators on there had pretty positive feedback, just basically saying they needed to add some of the tools that other live streamers are familiar with on Twitch. And the way I saw it is that there's this new push towards UGC that is live. And there's all these platforms that offer it, but no one's really taken that over yet. And Jeff, one of the reasons why I know TikTok is so big is because Northwest actually went live without Kim Kardashian West's permission and did a house tour of their home in Calabasas.
That's cute.
And she gained $1 million from that. So their live component is definitely something that I think they're looking to grow. And I'm wondering if they're also looking to kind of take over in the live UGC kind of area. Because no one has dominated that yet. It's sort of a new space.
Do you think that was staged?
Nah, I mean, it's funny. You should watch it. She gets in trouble.
Well,
and then she goes dark on
Of course
TikTok
she gets in trouble. That's the whole... Lindsay, you're falling for the whole plan. Like, what do you? No, obviously, if it was a plant, they're not going to be like, oh well, we told her to do that. You got to play the con.
Again, I come back to TikTok. There's a ton of gaming videos on TikTok, right? Gaming videos already do well on TikTok. I just don't understand why you would get away from what makes TikTok quite differentiated, which is the shorter form, the vertical video, and sort of not live, like produced, right? They're recorded. There's music on top. It's a more produced video than just sort of live. Wani says, I think the TikTok can be really good for mobile gaming streaming since TikTok's more vertical. Wani, your point's a good one, but that's not the direction that TikTok's going in. And so
could it be as simple as like, hey, we have the audience, we're putting this together, seeing it work. Like it could be one of those things, like we don't know how many resources are going into this, where this isn't like Facebook pivoting to metaverse, where it's like, okay, we have now bet the entire company, we're going to spend $10 billion whatever on this strategy. This could just as easily be, hey, we know live streaming and gaming is really popular. It's probably popular with the people that are on our app. Let's see if we can throw together a pretty good product and see if we can take some market share in that market. And I understand that's maybe an obvious statement, but I think sometimes we look at these things and we can overanalyze them sometimes, where I think sometimes like the easy answer might be the right answer. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll work, but
Let me wrap this piece just on this one last question. Is there a future where we see TikTok starting to draw, the Dr. Lupos or all the guys who went from Twitch to YouTube? Is there a world where we see TikTok acquiring talent or getting exclusive talent, who only live stream on TikTok? Or is this a non-story that a year from now we won't even be talking about? Lindsay, I'm curious, what are your thoughts?
I think TikTok will make its own stars as it has before. I think this is more for a casual gaming audience. I think anyone who's kind of more hardcore into whatever game they're watching is probably going to stay on Twitch. But the platform has millions of viewers. People are interested in gaming content. Easy play to me.
I don't think it pulls anyone off of Twitch or YouTube. I think if anything, it would pull them off of Instagram and Twitter, right? Where it's just that much more seamless. Interesting.
I will say,
No, go for it.
TikTok does discovery better than any other platform, and maybe that's their ace in the hole, right? Maybe because the growth on TikTok is so much better than, like, if we're just at our own growth, we're growing 10 times faster on TikTok than we are on any other platform, and I think it's a testament to the discovery sort of engine at the heart of TikTok. Maybe they realize, look, live streaming's still not, like, no one has really won just yet. Maybe we can apply the same thing. It'll be curious to see, or they may just fail like Microsoft and we never hear about this ever again, which I guess is also possible. Antonio says, how is it that multi-billion-dollar companies are unable to innovate? They all cash grab. Why are they so lazy? Antonio, it's a great question, but this is why startups exist. This is why entrepreneurs, being an entrepreneur is a possible career path. I think it's just inertia, right? When you have lots of employees and certain ways of doing things, and you end up with a bunch of B and C players just by the nature of getting big, innovation tends to go away, and there's a focus on playing defense and protecting the business rather than going and taking big risks. You can get fired for taking a big risk if you're an employee at a big company, but you won't get fired for just doing what everyone else is doing. Juan, he says, I agree that TikTok's not a competitor for Twitch. Hyper-casual game would be better fit for them. That'll be interesting. I mean, I guess, Lindsay, you feel this way, that the audience who streams on TikTok, the creators who stream on TikTok will more likely be casual gamers? Or do you think the audience will be more likely consumers of casual games?
I just think that either way, TikTok is going to make its own stars. I don't think that people who are currently entrenched in other platforms have any incentive to kind of come over. But I think the allure of TikTok is that you can start as a hyper casual gamer and build a huge audience with the tools that they're providing. That doesn't mean that it's going to be only hyper casual gamers, but I definitely just think that the platform, like you said, the discovery is so good. I think it just lends itself to someone who maybe isn't in the same style of streaming or of playing as someone on Twitch or YouTube gaming.
Lindsay, I 100% agree, I think, with your premise of discoverability and how it's going to be new stars. I just want to clarify, when you say hyper casual gamers, are you talking about like casual gamers, or are you talking about the type of like hyper casual mobile games? I just want to
either
specify.
One. I think it could be either one. I really think TikTok's unique. Like they will be able to, like, their algorithms, the audience and all of that will be able to narrow in on who's a star, kind of no matter the category of gaming.
Guys, let's move on here. We've got so much to get through. Jimbo Danks 52, wonder who this is, says, Jimmy's so cute. Jimmy, you got a fan.
Yeah, I guess the Twitch chat is working.
Your first one. All right, guys, let's talk about CD Projekt. They're in the news, and Jimmy, I think we're going to lean on you for this one because I think it's interesting. And the headline here, CD Projekt has settled its Cyberpunk launch lawsuit, suing investors just $1.85 million. The company was accused of violating federal law by misleading shareholders about the game. This is a settlement with a group of investors who sued the company over Cyberpunk's disastrous launch. What they're saying is they're paying out only $1.85 million. In comparison, the game made over $563 million in sales, and they spent just $2.2 million on their refund campaign. So to provide refunds to players who were unable to claim one from the original vendor. Which, by the way, guys, that's an interesting piece of data that I don't think I had seen before. That's not the total number of refunds. It's the ones that just couldn't get refunds from like Steam or PlayStation or wherever. So 1.85 million, the total damage here to CD Projekt for the disastrous Cyberpunk 2077 launch. I'm curious, Jimmy, maybe start with you. This feels a little bit like a slap, just a little slap on the wrist, not even that hard of a slap. Does this sort of clear the way for game developers to not worry about sort of the quality of the product they put out at launch, right? Because I don't know if it could have gone any worse than it did for Cyberpunk 2077, and all they end up with is a $1.85 million, settlement.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm not sure the damages originally claimed by those suing investors. And obviously, none of us are here offering legal advice or acting in any type of legal capacity. And to that point, and perhaps it's premature to announce, but we will be announcing some cool upcoming shows where we will be doing more of a deep dive in the legal side of things with some licensed, active, practicing esports lawyers. So, stay tuned for that. Really excited to have that insight, because it will really take these issues that we kind of skirt around or, touch on, but don't treat super thoroughly. And I think there will be a nice analysis and discussion there. When I look at this as just a general layman, right, or as just anyone that's kind of reading about it, one, what were these investors out of pocket and what were they suing for? Two, what's the federal statute and how much does that provide in terms of recovery, which is usually part of that? And three, my other thing I'm looking at is, 563 million on sales. I want to know if that's the net, because there were a lot of buybacks and returns, right, and promises to leverage into next gen releases. If you guys recall, it was a very messy release. It really, I thought it did well, other than the game not working. But then there was a lot of, oh hey, you can get a full refund. Anyone can get a full refund for an extended period of time, outside your normal return window. So I'm curious what the total sales were. Because if you look at 1.8 million on 563, that's not even a slap on the wrist, Paul. That's like some kind of misallocated minor, you know what I mean? Like that's such a non-issue. You don't even think twice about that. And if you also think about legal fees, the standard time it takes to go through the legal system, which could be lengthy and draining, not only did they come out ahead here, it's just like it's such a massive win for the developer here to avoid, I think, an even nastier fallout from the already terrible press that they got after the game came out and was just hot garbage. So for me, I don't think anyone, honestly, if anything, it gives the developer that much more confidence in being able to do whatever they want, release whatever game they want, and know that that there's really not that much for them to worry about, which is kind of a sad thing if you think about it, because the statutes should be designed to protect, I think, against that type of abuse. But that also kind of is telling us to the investors in terms of how strongly they thought of their own case. They settled because maybe they thought that was the best offer they were going to get, better than taking it through the legal system and taking their chances. So there's a lot of things to weigh in here. Yeah, Jeff. Oh, sorry, Jeff, go for it.
Sorry, I've been itching to jump in, and I think Jimmy, you're absolutely right. You're definitely right in the sense of if we zoom all the way in and just look at the lawsuit, obviously this 1.8 million is clearly nothing for CD Projekt. But to kind of get back to the question of kind of what happened to CG Projekt. I just while we were talking did a calculation. I mean, their stock is down almost 60% since the day they launched that game.
Massive.
So, when you look at it in that perspective, obviously that doesn't have to do with the lawsuit. That's because the sales were worse than expected. They kind of killed their reputation in the industry, and obviously because they put out a bad game. So I definitely think developers and publishers should be even more cognizant. And we've seen this problem time and time again, and even recently with the Battlefield launch and the Call of Duty launch and the Halo launch and the New World launch, and I can kind of keep going. So this does seem like a recurring trend, and maybe I guess people aren't learning from these mistakes. But yeah, the CD Projekt launch was disastrous and really set the company back a number of years. If you think about 60% down on the market cap, I mean, that is disastrous for many, obviously for the investors, for the shareholders, for the employees. So nobody's happy there. But in terms of the lawsuit, I agree. It is kind of small potatoes. So it just shows you maybe how hard the burden, or how high the burden of proof is for shareholders to win these kinds of lawsuits.
So guys, just while we were talking, I did a quick look here. So the company CD Projekt, in their financial statements, had an allowance of $51 million for returns. So that was sort of what they had anticipated, or what they booked in terms of returns. So, but it's still like that's 10%. That's a big number, but relatively small compared to the $563 million in revenue that they made on the game. But to both your points, fundamentally the problem seems to be that they can get away with this, right? Like if this was Ford and they released a car that the brakes don't work, or like there'd be a much larger.
It's a little bit different circumstances.
No, meaning a product that's fundamentally broken, that's not what you paid for. Okay, I don't know what's the better analogy.
I mean, if the game was burning people's eyes out and they went blind, yeah, there'd probably be a lot more liability.
But fundamentally, it feels very small, and it does feel like CD Projekt did get away, considering how much shareholder value was destroyed in this game. Let me just read some of the comments here. Robert, hey, welcome, Robert. This was on TikTok. Discoverability, hyper casual, audience algorithms. Agree, 100%. Wani says, "Hey Jimbo, please don't reveal the grand secret." Wani, I don't know if you mean the grand secret to having fans who think he's cute, or the grand secret to this legal question. Owen says, "Hey everybody, sorry I'm late. Glad I'm here though." Owen, welcome. We're glad you are here. Wani says, "My guess is shareholders who are in the lawsuit have very, very, very small number of stocks." I mean, no way of knowing. It was a class action lawsuit, right? So also, Jimmy, I don't think there's any way of knowing how many in the class. Like, is it 10 groups? Is it 1,000 groups? I don't know if that information is made public.
The file should be public, but it's hard for us to speculate.
Yeah. But it seems like a very small amount regardless. And I feel like, and Jimmy, maybe you disagree, there's some precedent set here that it doesn't matter how bad the product you put out is, there's not really any liability on the game developer.
It's kind of a broad statement, but I would agree that this definitely favored the developer, and other developers look at this and kind of are reassured, I think, by the outcome.
All right, guys, let's move on here. Just quick note: this has become everyone's favorite segment, I think, of the live stream. It's we are the world's #1 authority on gaming chairs and gaming chair reviews, so we have to do one every week. This week we have Secret Lab again. Just FYI, at some point Secret Lab's going to have to sponsor this live stream, given how much we've covered their chairs. And the headline here is Secret Lab reveals official Witcher gaming chair. And so we talked about The Witcher right off the bat here. And you can see Call of the White Wolf. It's their latest chair. It's signed by Geralt of Rivia. It has a Witcher logo. There's like some brown looking leather. There's also this version, which has his swords called Slay Monsters and Men. They even include Gwent cards with the purchase of every Secret Lab Titan Evo 2022 chair. So there you go. There's the Secret Lab Witcher editions that they've come out with. I'm curious, what do you guys think of this? Where does it rank in the pantheon of gaming chairs? Better or worse than Lamborghini? How do we like this one better, Lindsay?
Sorry, I think this one's, I don't know, this one's kind of a little bit more niche. So I would assume maybe a smaller production line than
Niche.
Lamborghini.
There's a zillion people watching The Witcher on Netflix.
Yeah, but it's different to passively watch a show than it is to buy a chair dedicated to a show / game / book series.
So, I mean, I really disagree because if you also look at, just peripherals in general, right? Mice that have game, Halo, the Halo mouse and headset, set that you can get, the mouse pads that have the game kind of logo integrated with them. I don't know. I think there's no shortage of pairings between companies like this and brands that you can look to do something with. So I kind of saw it from a different angle than you, Lindsay. But I also thought the opposite, that it would actually sell better than Lamborghini because of that same gaming overlap with a hardcore gaming audience. This is you're talking about like the I think it was 2016 game of the year. So it's also not like a small game. This is arguably one of the more popular games in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I would actually agree with Jimmy. I just don't know. I think there is, in terms of if you're looking at the gaming audience, there's a bigger niche of people who are probably hardcore Witcher fans and really identify with that brand than there are Lamborghini fans. Like, everyone likes Lamborghinis, but like, do they like them enough to buy a chair? Like, I don't know.
See, to me, the Lambo chair actually looked cooler because of the synthetic suede material. The design I thought was a lot cooler on the Lambo one. I just think there's more Witcher fans, and I didn't really think this style.
This has the leather, the brown, kind of like armorish looking.
Yeah, maybe I just don't like this one that much.
I don't think those are two styles, Paul. I think that's the one's the front, and then the others. Yeah.
What if it was really small, Lindsay?
Then I'd be back in.
I really like this one. I think that's cool. And of all the Secret Lab chairs, it's probably the one I like the most, actually, because I thought the design was cool. It's their swords and a wolf and like faux leather that looks like armor. Wani says, I think it's dumb design because if you see, nobody can see what is special about the chair. Well, you got the back. I mean, look, you have companies putting like RGB LEDs on chairs, so or there's like LEDs on the back of gaming monitors. Just because no one can see it, it's mental, right? It's it's there, so your performance increases.
I wish we had more sophistication or more knowledge also on these Gwent cards, because I'm looking at them right now, and these things are selling for a lot for like one deck. So I
My
think
understanding was
Gwent
was not doing that well commercially, but I guess maybe I could be wrong. Like when I had looked at CD Projekt, because I was actually going to potentially cover them when I was an analyst, and like it was just really small. Like, I mean, Hearthstone's pretty small for CCG, and like it.
Well,
I thought
it's a
I think
game
Gwent was
within
like
another game. Like,
yeah,
you know
Gwent
what I mean?
was like we're talking like, it's doing single-digit million revenue kind of thing. Like, it's like,
well, but also people
nothing.
weren't playing the standalone Gwent. They were logging into The Witcher 3 to play Gwent, so it's hard to even separate those two.
And also, The Witcher didn't have Netflix behind it. Like, we saw what Netflix has done for F1.
Definitely.
Right? There's no reason Netflix's ability to make something very mainstream popular. I think this is the power of that platform. Antonio says, I agree with Lindsay. How many wands do you have from the Harry Potter series?
Yeah, but a wand is not something you use every day. Like a Harry Potter chair, you might have.
I'm just waiting to go to Harry Potter World. Then I'm going to get a wand.
Bold
Speak for
statement.
yourself, Jeff. Don't use a wand every day. Come on. All right, guys. Let's move on. Let's talk about a more serious story here. And this is 100 Thieves in the news, and I thought the headline here was very clickbaity, very catchy. And the headline here, 100 Thieves president explains why making profit isn't their priority. And so the article, I mean, I actually don't think the article's that good. It's not that well written. But basically what they're saying, I can sum up the article very quickly for you, is, we're growing fast. We've raised a bunch of money. It's to drive growth. So we don't care about being profitable. And the reality is, if we cared about being profitable, we would grow a lot slower and we wouldn't be able to do all the things we're doing. So that's, in a nutshell,
Which,
sort of this article. Jeff, sorry, go ahead if you have
to
thoughts
be
on
fair,
it.
that's like the answer. Literally any company ever, any growth company that's losing money has that response every time. It's like, well, we're growing really fast and we're not burning money, we're investing, and like we could be profitable, but we want to grow fast and blah blah blah. So it's like, it's not a surprise. I will say, so I don't know if you guys saw the this guy John, the COO of 100 Thieves, was on the Joe Pompliano podcast. I don't know if you guys know who that is or know
Never
his
heard of that
podcast.
podcast.
You don't know the
Make
Pomp
sure to
brothers?
subscribe
They're like
to
these crypto.
Business of Esports.
They're like these like crypto family. You guys don't know the Pomplianos? Greg definitely does. They're like this crypto royalty family. But anyway, one of them has like a sports focused podcast, and this guy John was on it last week. Actually, was really good. So worth checking out. If you're looking for a second podcast to check out outside of the Business of Esports and Meta Woman,
like
and
a fourth podcast. This better be your fourth podcast that you subscribe to.
Yeah, but wait, was there a point? Like, did he say something interesting in that podcast, or
no? I just wanted to talk about this cool podcast. No, he actually talked about the story. It was like the founding story of 100 Thieves, how he got involved, kind of their, how sort of it got founded with I guess there was like a venture capitalist that kept reaching out to Nadeshot and was like, forget the guy's name, but it was like this no-name VC, like younger guy, kept reaching out to Nadeshot and be like, hey, you should turn your passion into a business. And this was sort of before the whole creator economy like became popular. And I guess he sort of introduced Nadeshot to Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cavs, and that's how 100 Thieves started. And then they brought in this guy John, who had worked at another VC firm to kind of be like the business side of things. And it's a good listen.
When anyone sees this article, is anyone more like, are you more at ease with the 100 Thieves vision and story? Like, are you more likely to invest if they came to you tomorrow, or does this make you more worried? I guess, Jimmy, I don't know if you have thoughts.
It's a non-story to me, honestly. That's just empty words and an empty topic, so it doesn't affect me one way or the other. I'd still probably, I'm already invested in one team, so I probably wouldn't invest in a second, just because I don't know, I wouldn't know what merch to wear to all my events.
Your point's kind of an interesting one, right? And Jeff alluded to this as well. It's kind of a non-story because this is the story that every single growth company on the planet tells, right? Like, it's okay that we're losing money because we're growing. And I don't, as a startup guy, fundamentally, I don't disagree with that, right? But then it makes you question, why does this story exist at all, right?
Right.
Why does this story exist? And I'm trying to, like, if I put my tinfoil hat on, I'm trying to figure out what could be the reason behind it. Is it that there's this stigma with esports orgs that they're all burning cash, and I'm probably responsible for some of that, right? Like I spend a lot of time knocking them for the way they manage their business, and this is like a shot at that. Like, hey, we know people are criticizing.
Also, kind of seems like a response to our similar or our discussion, as well as numerous others, I'm sure, about that Series C $60 million raise, right, at the 460 valuation. Kind of seems like a response to any doubters or naysayers or just critics of that recent raise. So to your point, Paul, I think if you look at the timeline of what they had put out before this, why now? Well, maybe it's that kind of response to that.
Yeah. I think the much more interesting follow-up, and I would be curious to see if that came up in the article, is just like, what are you investing in? Because it's easy to say, oh, we have so many areas of growth, we have so much we're excited about. The follow-up should be, okay, well, what? Like, what areas are you looking at? And I know they've done that tech acquisition and kind of,
It's in there. They said a good portion of it says, what do they plan to do with the money? A good portion of that is going to be earmarked for growing our existing businesses. And then we'll reserve a little bit of money for launching some new businesses. We have a lot of great entrepreneurs and projects that we're thinking about, the 100 Thieves president explained. If there are companies that we really admire where we share the same philosophy and the community can get really excited about them being part of the 100 Thieves family of brands, that would make sense.
That's like, again, though, that's not an answer. That's a lot of words that says nothing. You know?
Hey, we're a business that has money. Now we're going to go do some business things. Don't worry about what our balance sheet is.
Like, I don't deny any of those points. Like, I'm sure any business that they invest in is going to share core philosophies, but it's just a lot of words that don't really say anything.
It's not like they're going to go out and like buy like Pillsbury or something. Like, of course they're going to buy a business that makes sense to buy and fits in with them. Just like
true.
That doesn't tell anything about strategy.
I mean, to be honest, they don't have to reveal their strategy, but again, it comes back to, then why do this interview, right? Like,
yeah, that's more the point.
Yeah.
Like,
we all know.
For the impressions.
Yeah.
And if they're the ones who got asked to do the interview, then the interviewer in this case, right, like, is terrible. You didn't draw out anything of any interest or of note. You know, I think that you guys, you know, get me thinking about this in the way you're talking. It would have been interesting to have a really clear picture of where they spend that $60 million, right? Like, if they have a really clear vision for it, other than just, you know, to Adam's point here, what new businesses, different hoodies, which is what it sounds like. So, Wani says, yeah, please do better on World Championship 100 Thieves. Well, you know, in that article, they do break down their three sort of verticals: esports, apparel, and entertainment. Those are their three kind of like.
By the way, apparel being a third of your business, that's massive, right? That kind of is also very telling as to the whole hoodie org discussion. Because I would argue a Gen G apparel is maybe 10%, you know, of their focus, I would argue. So when you think a third of 100 Thieves, that's outrageous.
They are the hoodie org among hoodie orgs. Wani says at Adam, maybe another Gucci collab. That backpack was so bad, so ugly. Anyways, let's move on, guys. Let's talk about some other things. We've got China in the news. Let's talk about China a little bit. If you remember, one of the recurring sort of news stories that we've covered here was China basically cracking down on, you know, kids playing, so anyone under 18 playing, and limiting them to certain hours and certain amounts of time. And this article I thought was interesting in that context, and I'll read the headline for you guys here. It says, China's video gaming crackdown, 2021 revenue growth slows sharply amid teenage play limits and new license suspension. Industry's gross sales revenue grew 6.4% in 2021 from a year ago, a sharp reduction from last year's 20.7% growth, according to the report. Slower growth comes after Chinese regulators implemented teenage play limits and froze new game license approvals in August. So the article, basically, there's not much else in there other than a few numbers, which we'll talk about. But the headline here is they cracked down, and I think we had a discussion on this live stream. Would it have an impact on the industry in China, right? And I think we all agreed it would, and people should stay away. Now we have data. The growth has slowed massively in a year where growth has accelerated just about everywhere else. I'm curious, Jeff, maybe start with you. Like, do you think we see an about face here from China? Do we think, like, what is the result of these numbers coming out with growth slowing? And what do you think is the impact or repercussions of this?
It's interesting. I mean, I don't think we'll see an about face because I don't think that the Chinese regulators ever cared about, you know, if anything, they were vindictive against this industry. And, you know, we hypothesized many times why it seemed like it was almost a shot at some of the companies in this industry. So it would be surprising if they implement this policy, sales go down, then they're like, wait, oh my God, we had no idea sales were going to go down. Like, sorry, we hurt you. Let's change that back. To me, that, you know, I'm being facetious, but that just doesn't, that wouldn't pass my smell test. Yeah. So I don't think they would do that. What was the second part of the question?
Just the general repercussions of this. Like,
the repercussions are huge. And the one thing I wanted to point, I guess, before, I wonder how much, it would be interesting to parse out how much of this is one, potentially a tough comp, right? You grew 20% the year before. It was kind of the COVID lockdown year. We did see, you know, some areas of growth stalling, even in the US with some video games where like people frankly like went outside for a few months prior to this new wave, and we kind of had lockdowns easing. So you did see some pullback in engagement. So it would be interesting to see how much of it was due to that. How much was it due to the new game? You talked about the new licenses slowing. How much was it because of that? And how much was it because of this actual minors? Because the one part of the narrative about minors was that it was only a very small percentage of revenue. I think it was like 4% of Tencent's revenue was from minors. So, to what extent did that all go to zero? And that's why this is happening. It would be interesting to parse out the different pieces of, I guess, the growth slowdown, which we don't have the data to do, but.
We don't. I will say just one thing that was in here, which I thought was interesting. It says the sales growth rate. So China's gaming market was worth 46.6 billion in 2021, just as a sort of a baseline here. But the sales growth rate in 2021 was the slowest since 2018, and in that year, in 2018, regulators froze new game license approvals for 9 months. So, you're talking about 2018 being a pretty bad year from a growth perspective. This was the slowest since 2018.
But I guess to my point, that I wonder how much of it was due to the slowing of game approvals versus the minors rule.
Yeah, that's true. Lindsay, I don't know if you have thoughts on this or.
Yeah, and to me, further to Jeff's point about we don't really know the impact to minors. To me, one of the impacts that I guess we don't talk about that much is not that minors can't play games, but that companies are having to divert time and resources to actually abiding by that law. So improving their facial recognition software and even just pushing out messages when the limit is reached and keeping track of all that and whatnot. That's a lot of wasted time and resources that could be spent on other things. So I don't know that it's necessarily that the minors themselves are spending less money, or if just a lot more stuff is being funneled into actually abiding by those regulations, which also hurts the gaming companies.
It's fair.
Jimmy, any closing thoughts here before we move on?
No, nothing to add. I thought that was excellent.
All right, guys. Wes says, by the way, I'll make 60 million worth of hoodies for them. Wes, you just got to reach out to the folks at 100 Thieves. Guys, before we move on, I just want to mention this live stream, very generously supported, sponsored by YouGov. YouGov provides the absolute best data on gamers, games, esports fans around the world. If you're looking into the space at all, if you're operating in the gaming space, if you're a brand that's not sure or that's maybe, advertising in the space currently, if you're on any side of the table in or around gaming or the gaming audience, highly recommend talking to the folks at YouGov. The data is incredibly actionable, as we've shown many times on this live stream. Just go check out any of the YouGov Insights segments that we've done. But also make sure to go look at yougov.com. I'm going to put this in the chat. yougov.com/gaming-esports. They have a bunch of free reports, free data. They just put out a 3-part report that we've highlighted on the live stream about gaming influencers, which I highly recommend you guys dig into. But yougov.com/gaming-esports. Go show them some love. If you need a direct contact into YouGov, please reach out to me, to Jimmy, to Jeff, to Lindsay, to any of us. We can all point you in their direction and make introductions there, and they will be more than happy to talk to you guys. So yougov.com/gaming-esports. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about this one. I wasn't happy about this next topic, guys. I really wasn't. But it's one I called so long ago. I mean, this is a profit was right moment. But I never like to see failure. I really don't, because I'm only a cheerleader for the industry more than anything. And this one was interesting here. It was a message that was announced. I actually don't know where it came from, but it was someone from the Playverse sort of community team that had put out a message to their collegiate community. So the partners they have on the colleges that they have signed up, and basically saying, I won't read this whole thing, that Playverse is pulling out of college esports, pulling out of colleges as a customer completely. So they will not be serving colleges. They will not be running college esports tournaments. They won't be selling anything to colleges anymore. And instead, they're going to focus only on high schools, which is where they're going to put all their time and effort, I guess. I had called Play versus decline and most likely failure probably a couple of years ago now because I saw the writing on the wall. I'm curious what you guys think of this, like sort of moving out of college esports, because I obviously have some thoughts on this, but I'm curious what you guys conclude from Playverse moving out of college and supposedly wanting to focus more just on high school. Jimmy, maybe start with you, being,
Colleges
the
aren't
esports
spending.
professor than you are.
Yeah, colleges aren't spending. It's hard enough to get a program dedicated to any university, and there's no one way to go about it. Depending on what college you're looking at, you're talking about a club versus something that gets, has to get approved by a regents board or whatever. However they're structured, there's so much red tape around colleges to even get the program itself approved. And then when you look at how they're marketing and how they're attracting and going about developing that program or that initiative, it's kind of mind blowing because you look at college sports, traditional sports, mostly basketball and football, with just massive spends. And then what is it, Title IX, right, where they have to do equal spending on women's sports, which is a wonderful initiative. But when you look at what they're spending on traditional sports, you just wonder why they're not doing that or anything close to any one of those sports here in esports. So, kudos to Play Versus, I guess, for getting out because I don't know if high school is going to be that much better for them, honestly. But it just seems, and it's kind of sad for us because again, we're cheerleaders of this industry and we want to showcase the good. Last week we had an ed tech company on the show to talk about different ways to think about integrating esports with an elementary kind of a schooling level. But if you don't see a college leading the way, and if you don't see a lot of high schools also that are other, I don't want to say movers and shakers, but kind of these prime examples of how great this integration can be for a student as opposed to a working professional or a young competitive player. It's just sad, it's sad that the colleges aren't investing enough in the space. And I think Playversus is not going to be the first company that pulls out of that area. I was in that area 3 years ago, and thanks to the profit here, I got out very early. So I think it's unfortunately going to continue to happen. All we can hope for are that there will be some colleges like where Paul and I both teach that will continue to support it, that will provide an academic foundation, not just competitive, and that hopefully that will at least keep that interest there, or keep the students. It will enable them to do what they want to do, and maybe we'll see growth later. But this isn't really surprising, honestly. It's just sad.
Jeff, I'm curious. Do you agree that the problem is the market here, like the colleges themselves, or is this probably more a Playverse problem?
I'm definitely interested to hear your take. I don't know is my honest answer. I think you can convince me, or you can potentially convince me that maybe it's an easier sales cycle to sell into high schools. Obviously, there are a lot more high schools than there are colleges, right? Like there's realistically probably 100 or 200 colleges that do esports, period. Whereas high schools, there's literally in the state of California, there's probably 10,000 high schools. So, you can convince me it's a much larger addressable market. I'm not sure the sales cycle is different, but if the sales funnel is different and for whatever reason it harms your ability to sell into or it's a different process to sell into colleges, and it's like, hey, it's inefficient for us to have these two sales teams, two sales funnels, two sales resources. Maybe you could convince me this is a actual smart business move and not just a retreat. But I think that your argument that you're about to make is probably going to be more compelling than I think you're going to make. So please enlighten us.
No, I wish I had a sort of a good argument. Unfortunately, I think this was just kind of basic. It's and I remember I go back to that PAX panel that I was on. I don't even know how many years it's been now, 2 or 3 years ago, I guess now, where there was someone, I think they were working at a college, got up and said, because I had made some comments about Playverse, and Playverse had all the trappings of seeming mismanagement, right? Like the CEO posing with his Lamborghini on Instagram, and they raised, $90 million like 2 months after they raised $60 million, right? Like there's a whole bunch of red flags that felt a little wrong. And I made those comments on the panel, and I said, look, I probably don't, I do see the future. And on this one, I think this ends in a, fiery failure and a bunch of hot garbage. And this guy stood up and said, look, we're Playverse customers, and the experience is awful. Like, it's actually awful. And unfortunately, there aren't many other options, but we've had a horrible time with them. And that, to me, was the nail in the coffin. Like, you get a review like that from someone working at a college, and using the product, and the product's no good, eventually it's going to fail, right? Like, I just think the product was no good. There was a lot of hype artificially generated because of all the money they raised, and fundamentally the lack of execution, and didn't deliver on whatever their promise to those colleges was. So, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I think, honestly, and Jimmy, this is where I disagree with you, there are specific cases where the the companies going after the college opportunity are doing it completely wrong. Like, there's a bunch of people doing, broadcasting college tournaments. Like, I don't think anyone cares to watch average, like, amateur college players playing Rocket League against each other, right? Like, to me, that's a fool's errand. But I do think there's a massive number of college students who would like to compete, and there's opportunity to sell stuff to them, or to give them, products, services, tech, whatever. I just think Playverse has always focused more. It was more sizzle than steak. And this is starting to now, sometimes my prophecies come true, but it takes a while for them to come true. And this is just one of them that over time, Playverse is going to run out of money, and the product's going to be no good. And the retreat here, I guarantee, is probably to cut their burn, because they are running out of money. And it's no more complicated than that. So, but I do think, just to finish my point, the college opportunity is a massive one, huge, right? And that no one has really done anything that great with yet. And not to take away, Jimmy's point was good. It is hard. It's not simple, but I don't think this is one where it was the college audience that was the problem. Jeff, is that what you thought I was going to say?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
All right, guys. Lindsay, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this before we move on.
Classic theme: bad management usually leads bad results.
It's funny how consistent it is. This next story is Jeff, this is right in your wheelhouse, I think. And this is Luckbox in the news. And I'll tell you why I think this article was interesting. It maybe seemed like a nothing story, but I thought it was interesting. And the headline here is, Luckbox launches online casino on their esports betting platform. So for those of you who don't know, Luckbox has an esports betting platform, right? They're one of the biggest, if not the biggest. They're pretty high profile, and have specialized historically in esports betting. And what they're doing is they're adding casino games to their esports platform. So I think interesting to me, and I wanted to highlight this because it's sort of the reverse of what we see, where the online casino games and the sports betting platforms are all trying to think about how they add esports. Here we have an esports betting platform looking to adding casino games. Jeff, I think we obviously have to start with you here just to get your thoughts on what feels a little bit like a reverse strategy.
No, I mean, this is fairly simple. When you have a product offering, it's just an add-on. So, one of the beautiful things about esports bettors, and why a lot of people are interested in the industry, is one, the demographic, then also the customer acquisition cost. And I think Steven Sauls, who came on your podcast with Rivalry, did a great job explaining how the customer acquisition cost of an esports bettor is currently much lower than the customer acquisition cost of a traditional sports bettor, which is great. The flip side, and maybe the negative, is that the lifetime value, or basically the amount of money that they're going to spend on your site, is currently much less. So the LTV to CAC, which is kind of the ratio that a lot of these companies look at, is still better for esports betting, or at least he said that theirs is, which is great. But it's not necessarily so much better. Having said that, what you can do, if you can cross-sell casino to an esports player, that increases their lifetime value by basically making them stick around and spend more and lose more money. Also, typically, and this is a little bit of inside baseball, but an online casino is a lot more profitable than a sports book or an esports book, because obviously with a slot machine, you're going to win a certain mathematical percentage of the time, whereas someone might actually be really good at betting on esports, and you could technically lose because the house is taking on risk. So it's a higher hold percentage is what it's called. So this is all about a lot of the nitty gritty metrics of cross-selling, increasing kind of the amount of your customers spending, and also just giving people a reason to come to your platform more often and stick around, right? There's not always going to be an esports match on every day, but there's always the casino will always be there and be available. Also, if someone comes on, they put in a bet, they say, hey, I'm going to take 100 Thieves, blah, blah, blah. While they're on there, they might say, oh, well, I'm also going to spin a few, slot machine wheels or roulette, get on the virtual roulette table. So just good business practice, to be honest.
Jeff, you don't think there's any downside in terms of not being like pure play esports betting, or just the perception potentially to an esports fan? Like, is there, in your mind, do you turn anyone away by?
No, I think it totally depends on how it's done. To your point, it could if you don't brand it right, but there are definitely ways to brand it. I don't think they're going to be going out and marketing to casino first customers, or when you go to the website, I'm sure it's not going to be in your face like, hey, come play slots. It's going to be, the customer journey will be all about esports, but somewhere there'll be a nudge, or they'll have some data that shows, hey, this person, based on their demographics or the way they're betting, maybe has a proclivity to play XYZ. Or maybe they'll do some rewards like, hey, get a free bet if you come play, 3 slot machine, whatever. And then they can nudge people that way. I think there are smart ways to do it that aren't in your face. And this is a pretty tried and true practice. Like, look at what DraftKings has done. I mean, they started as daily fantasy. They moved into sports betting. Now they've gotten really big. They're actually one of the 3 biggest online casino, like iGaming players in the US. And they're even moving into like NFTs and trading cards and stuff like digital collectibles. So like, if you have a good brand and you do things in a sensible, smart way, I think you can really extend it to different products without hurting your brand.
Jimmy and Lindsay, I'm curious, and for the chat also, just like anecdotally, I'm curious if you guys think you would go somewhere to place an esports bet and then just so happen to play casino games. Like, how much, I don't know if there's any data around it, but I'm curious what percentage of customers do you think end up doing the other thing?
There's probably a strong correlation between the two, and I also think that that audience or that user, that person, is going to skew older also. So they've probably already played casino games in person, and if you have that online, like Jeff said, it's a classic add-on. Jeff's the expert on this. I have very little to disagree with over. Honestly, I thought that was pretty on it.
Lindsay, any thoughts before we move on?
No, I mean, I agree with all that, and I like it when you bring up stories for the juice.
Thank you.
We still need Juice's Corner or something. Wes says NAC and CSL have collegiate under control and doing well. That's true, Wes. I still think both are really quite small relative to the size of the opportunity.
Didn't eFuse make an announcement they're doing a bunch of collegiate stuff?
I don't think anyone can figure out what
eFuse
is doing. I don't think even eFuse knows what eFuse is doing. Guys, let's talk about Riot here. Riot in the news. Riot. Let me bring this up. Sorry. The headline here is former Riot Games executive launches new tabletop game studio. And so this is not really like video gaming news, but I did think it was interesting just from a general gaming perspective, because one of the interesting things here is the first sentence. One of the key people behind the hit series Arcane has launched a new tabletop game studio. This is Jane Chung Hoffacker, who launched Incredible Dream Studios, a new tabletop game studio aiming to produce a new game IP called Kinfire Chronicles. They raised $2 million to fund the project. It's a co-op role-playing game, but tabletop game. And she was one of the key people behind Arcane, which I thought was cool. And they've hired a bunch of AAA like gaming talent to go produce this tabletop game. So I'm just curious what you guys think. You know, it was interesting to me because you have this person who comes from the video gaming world at Riot, was involved with one of their most successful projects maybe ever, right? Like Arcane's a huge hit, and is now going to make a tabletop game. Is the conclusion that literally anything gaming can basically get funded these days, right? Like, I don't know. I know tabletop games are making a resurgence, but it's an interesting thing to see, you know, a discussion around new IP and AAA talent and this kind of thing in the context of tabletop games. Lindsay, I don't know if you have thoughts on this.
To me, I just think that entertainment as a whole is becoming more fluid, and I see this as a symptom of that more so than tabletop games coming back in general. And I don't know if you have this story queued up, but Hades winning a Hugo Award. Like, there's just even like the Witcher series being both a book and a video game, and now a massively popular Netflix series. I just think that good IP is just becoming the most important thing, more so than the way that IP is getting put out. And if tabletop games is one way you can do that, then why not? All entertainment is kind of having a moment. So
is the point you're making that, like, she's gone out to create new IP here, right? And raised quite a bit of money to do it. This is going to be a new, you know, universe or whatever they're creating, Kinfire Chronicles, right? It's role playing, so there's some universe around it, I assume. Like, does it even matter what the format is? Is that what you're basically saying? Like, it doesn't matter what the format is, that the appetite everywhere is for just, you know, new IP, and at some point even a tabletop game company may get acquired because the IP is interesting and then turned into other things, video games, shows, etc. Like, is that your conclusion here, that what matters is the unique IP, the world you create, and the format doesn't matter so much anymore?
I think that's been proven time and time again, and we're finally starting to get away from just book series being the way that people do that. So it's kind of a cool take on how to create a universe. Whether this is massively successful or not, but I don't know. But my theory is definitely that the IP is the important thing right here, and however it gets expressed, as long as it is compelling, audiences will buy.
Jimmy, do you have any thoughts on this
Yeah,
one?
no, that's fascinating. I think, you know, I got back into Monopoly when they did a Rick and Morty collab, you know, because I love Rick and Morty. And Monopoly's not new IP, Rick and Morty is, but then seeing it come to life, right? And that's a little different because it's a crossover and a branded activation, but it's the same in terms of how are we revitalizing old IP through gaming. And that was, you know, maybe if they do like a digital Rick and Morty Monopoly, I'll watch that on Twitch. I don't know. But what's really interesting is, you know, you have someone with an amazing pedigree at, I think, all of our favorite, you know, developer publisher out today. You got to argue that Riot's probably doing it better than anyone else and has been for years now. Someone who worked on also that new development, right, on how do we take this IP and do something different with it, and made it into a massive success, a global phenomenon, truly. And she is taking a risk with this, you know, in trying to do something similar but different in terms of how do we now take this other IP and do something new and different with it, and create this audience and revitalize the brand. So, you know, creatively, I think there's a lot to respect and to keep an eye on, and I think it's a really interesting angle that she's taking. You know, I didn't have a lot of interest in this area of gaming, but obviously there's a massive audience for it. I thought one of the funniest memes I've seen all year was someone saying, "Can you imagine if chess was an esport? People would be saying the queen is so OP and to, you know, nerf the queen and all these things," right? Like, hilarious and true. So when you think about these tabletop games that have had the same rules, that have been balanced for, you know, decades, if not longer, would love to see what she does here, because I think there's a lot to do. To Lindsay's point, there's a lot of innovation to be had.
Wes, makes an interesting point here. It says tabletop revenues around 8 billion a year, larger than esports by far. I mean, that's a bit unfair, Wes, in the sense that like it's way smaller than gaming still, right? Which is maybe the more fair comparison, like video games. But it's a good point that it's not an insignificant industry and it's not an insignificant market to go after. I agree. I think that's a good point. Guys, let's finish up. I got one last story here, and this is, I kind of left a big one for the end here, and I think it's interesting. And just sort of again another shameless plug. We launched 2 new shows, guys. We launched Meta Woman, hosted by very own Lindsay the Boss Paz. Which, if you're not subscribed to, just go do it now. I'm telling you, so you might as well get it done. Go on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Spotify on your phone, on your PC, doesn't matter, and search Meta Woman and then hit subscribe. I promise you won't regret it. It's an amazing show featuring women in gaming and the metaverse. Lindsay asks some really good questions. There's some really great discussion, and it's a lot of fun. Because Lindsay, let's face it, is the most fun of the 4 of us. So you're going to get the most fun content with her. If you're looking for something a little more serious, I'm just kidding. Jeff and I are hosting another podcast called Meta Business, and where we talk about the intersection of business and the metaverse. So it's kind of like Business of Esports, but with a larger focus on Web3 and metaverse. And I would love for you guys to subscribe to that as well. I mentioned that because this last story, I'm trying to find stories that lead into you guys going to listen or watch Meta Business. And this is a bit of a metaverse story here, and it's a big one. And this is Rec Room in the news. I don't know if you guys have heard of Rec Room, but the headline here is Rec Room raises $145 million at a $3.5 billion valuation for its user-generated immersive gaming platform. So Rec Room, it's free to download. It's cross-platform. They call it a social gaming company. They raise $145 million. It's the rounds being led by Cotu Management, which we've seen these guys, invest before here on the live stream, and existing investors are coming back as well, including Sequoia, Index, Madrona, which are 3 huge names in the venture capital world. Also worth noting that in March they raised $100 million, led by Sequoia, at $1.25 billion valuation. And what is it? 9 months later, are raising at a $3.5 billion valuation, or raised at a $3.5 billion valuation. So more than a 2x increase, almost 3x increase in valuation over a period of 9 months, and another $145 million raised after the $100 million they raised in March. Now, the only knowledge, guys, I had of Rec Room before this was it's like I thought it was the free game that came with like your PlayStation or whatever. But I honestly had never even really seen or used the platform before that. I'm curious, what do you guys think of this? It feels a little Roblox. It's obviously a Roblox competitor, where people can go and develop content for it. But I'm curious, Jeff, maybe start with you, if your thoughts on this.
Yeah,
one.
So I do have some thoughts. I mean, number one, I, like you, was not super familiar with Rec Room. So my first thought was, wow, this is literally a Roblox clone, and your $3.5 billion seems really high for a platform I wasn't familiar with. However, then I read the article, and so the number that stuck out to me, they said they have 37 million users, up from like 2 million a year ago. So we don't know if that's probably not daily active users, so it's not a perfect like for like comparison. But Roblox has 47 million daily active users. So if you assume it's somewhat like for like, I mean, Roblox is a $60 billion company. Rec Room, $3.5 billion, all of a sudden doesn't seem all that crazy. The other thing, I guess, now that I'm thinking about is, people, when Minecraft got acquired by Microsoft, everyone kind of thought Minecraft had won this sort of sandbox, user-generated content sort of war, even though Roblox had been around for a while. So it's not like Roblox started after Minecraft was acquired, but nobody had really heard of it at that point. And really in the last 2 years, Roblox has gone from, I think it was valued at $4 billion to now $60 billion. So if you have the users And we know this is a platform that works. It's user-generated content. It's a pretty tried and true business model. Like it wouldn't be that shocking with the kind of backing that these guys have if we were talking about a Rec Room IPO in the next, year or so. And it could be worth, 10, 15 billion. It seems crazy. Like when I even started this sentence, it felt crazy. But when you just really think about it with the numbers that they're doing and the business model that they have, it really isn't that crazy. I think the market is big enough where multiple of these kind of sandbox, dare I say, metaverses can be successful. So, yeah.
I mean, you're talking also like even a 30 billion, like, because if the numbers are true here, which I assume they are, right? You're talking definitely not a quarter. Like you're talking something that's probably like half the size of a Roblox. You could be talking about a $30 billion business, right? Not 10 or 15 even. And then it gets to these questions of what I think is most interesting of like, if you look at Roblox's valuation, it's basically what, like over $1,000 per user, basically, like the way the math shakes out or something like that, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what you're paying per user in terms of the valuation of the business. Here you're only at like $100 a user, right? You're an order of magnitude smaller. You're right. This seems cheap all of a sudden, right? This seems like a bargain, but you could see how a Sequoia sees a path to a 10x return, right? And they've already made a 3x here essentially because they led the last round. Their money, the valuation has tripled here. I mean, Jeff, let me just push a bit. How many more sandbox metaverses of this scale and size do you think we will see over the next 6 to 12 months? Like, at what point does the market become saturated?
I mean, I think we're going to see a lot more try. I mean, we already, none of these that we've talked about so far in this little section have even kind of hit on the kind of the blockchain, which is sort of another one of these big buzzwords where I think you have a lot of these different platforms. We've talked about it on Meta Business a few times. You have Decentraland, you have a company literally called Sandbox is another one. Yeah. And that's just to name two. So I think there are going to be a lot of players going after this market. In terms of how many can win, that I don't know. I'd love to hear, everyone else's thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, we're going to keep seeing these because it seems to continue to be working. So until the market's not saturated, if these keep popping up and actually succeeding, when we'll know the market's over is when they pop up and disappear.
Jimmy, do you have thoughts on this?
I mean, I'm just sitting here listening to the discussion, waiting for them to IPO because I know I'm going to jump on that. It's interesting. I'm listening and nodding my head and just super interested in everything about that we've been discussing all week because this is something that we had shared internally and we're talking about a little bit in our chat. And I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, 2 or 3 more. I think it's less about how many companies are going to try this and more about who's going to stick, right? Because execution is so important. Growing communities is so hard. Obviously, there's a massive interest for sandbox style UGC and everything that these guys are doing and Roblox is doing. To me, it's more who's going to be able to execute that well enough to grow a community of scale. Because like you guys said, there's going to be a lot that are trying, and maybe that's the point that indicates when it is saturated. But you got to imagine at least 2 or 3 more, right? Like that's super conservative to me, at least.
Lindsay, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's like asking when we're done with social media platforms. You can never necessarily predict when the next one's coming.
True. It's one of those things though where, I don't know how sticky these platforms are, right? Like if the experience on a competing platform is more compelling, it's not like, I get that the networks matter, and if your friends are on Roblox and are playing Roblox, you're more likely to play Roblox, right? But the cost and effort to switch or create a new account on a new platform is not that high. Like, I don't know if you have the same sort of very sticky network effects that keep you locked into any one sandbox for a long period of time because it's not that hard for you and your friends to just go create an account somewhere else if the experience there is more compelling. I think where I worry with these is just what's different, right? Like, how is this different from what you can do in Roblox or what you can do in Minecraft or any other sandbox platform, other than it's new and different and called something else. So, long term, I don't know where it shakes out. There will definitely be more than one winner, right? This is not like Roblox is not going to run away with this, but feels a little Me Too. It feels like if I put myself in Sequoia's shoes, this felt a little bit like Jeff's sort of argument, which is, well, Roblox is worth 60 billion, so pretty good bet we get to like at least 10 or 15 on this one, without like a hardcore view on is there a viable long-term business here. All right, guys, that about wraps things up for this week's live stream. Really appreciate everyone who showed up. Make sure to tune into the podcast tomorrow, the Business of Esports podcast. If you're not already subscribed, go subscribe. Also, make sure while you're there, since you have your podcast app open, subscribe to Meta Woman, subscribe to Meta Business. Those new episodes, just so you guys know, they drop every week. So Meta Business episodes drop every Monday. Meta Woman episodes drop every Tuesday. So you literally have a full week of content from us now. You get Meta Business on Monday, Meta Woman on Tuesday. You get this live stream on Wednesday. You get the Business of Esports podcast on Thursday. And then if you miss the live stream on Wednesday, we put out the VOD on Friday. So you get a full week of content with so much more coming in the new year. Jimmy, Jeff, Lindsay, thank you guys. Thank you everyone who tuned in. Make sure to follow us everywhere. Biz Esports or Business of Esports, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, you name it, YouTube. Subscribe on YouTube, guys. We want to grow that channel also. And happy holidays and Merry Christmas to everyone. We are not going to miss a single show, so there will be a live stream next week also, and podcast next week and the whole bit. But hope everyone has a great holiday and a very Merry Christmas. And we will see you guys next week.